Hello and welcome to this special episode of Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers podcast. I'm Matilde and I'm your host, and today I am honored to welcome Lori Pappas on the show. Lori was one of the first female computer sales reps in the world in her 20s, an award-winning entrepreneur in her 30s and 40s, and after failing retirement, founded an international charity and moved to Africa in her 50s. At 67, she met the love of her life online, and at 75, Lori launched her next career with her award-winning book, The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within. Based on the innovative DREAM framework, The Magic of Yes includes practical strategies for personal growth and self-care, empowerment tools for leadership and success in business, and most importantly, tips for how you can access your inner wisdom in everyday life. Okay, so welcome. Welcome, Lori. It's an absolute honor to have you on the podcast today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
So today we're talking, one of the things that we're going to be talking about is your book, The Magic of Yes. And I love the title, by the way, because it does feel like there's such a power behind the word yes, like the universe speaks in yes. It doesn't actually speak in no. So
Exactly.
It's such a magical word. The first question I wanted to ask you is, what is the book inviting the readers to say yes to?
It really is. That's a great question. And I really think what the core message is to say yes to the fact that you are worthy. No matter what happened in your childhood, no matter what chaos is going on around you, you are worthy. And I think that that really is the foundation of our being. You know, each one of us are born as innate individuals. We all have choice, and we can choose to take those steps to develop our feeling of worthiness, no matter what crap or stuff we got born into. It's our choice as far as what path we take.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you bring in how it's a choice. So I know from reading your bio and reading about your book that you have been through trauma in your life. You are a survivor. So you are stating that from actually having been through a lot of stuff in your life. So how did you come to this place where it's a choice? How did you transform it from maybe I don't know if you've ever felt like a victim or bet the drum of the big victim story, like we can do sometimes. But how did you change and turn from there into feeling empowered that it's actually a choice?
Well, you know, for me, even though my mother was convinced I was possessed by the devil and I ended up being committed to a nut house at 16, which, you know, was pretty traumatic. And I realized how vulnerable I was being there. And so I made the choice of figuring out what it was that they wanted me to say in order to get out. That was a reaction of mine. I don't know that I ever chose, you know, made a conscious choice. It's just that I have an innate survivorship piece in me that has come through. I don't particularly need to go there, but I'm one of these people that really believes that I'm a reincarnated soul. So I've had a lot of practice of dying and living again. So that was kind of an automatic response to me. But if I could just take a minute and share a story about a friend of mine, Debbie, who came home with her brother when she was 11 to find that her mother had abandoned her, that her mother had just taken off and her father was in Vietnam. So she really wasn't equipped to deal with it, but she managed to call the base, find out that, let them know that her mother had left, and her father ended up home. Well, if you fast forward 40 years later, Debbie found herself sitting behind 3 sets of locked doors, realizing that why was she just settling for the crumbs of life? Why was it that she had fallen into this victimhood piece? And so what her choice became was, why I need to think about why I'm letting toxic people into my life. So her choice became that. And why am I not worthy of having good people around me? And she realized it was her choice of letting those people in. And so that motivated her then to do the work that she needed to do in order to start making a different choice. And so that's just a little snippet of how other people have been able to deal with that. Is there comes an aha moment. We all have a moment of clarity. We do at some point, and whether or not we pay attention to it or not is up to us. And that's what becomes really important, is saying, oh, well, why am I sitting here in this mess? What choices did I make that got me in this mess? And then why am I making those choices? And what do I need to do? What do I need to do to learn to make different choices? So that's really what it all comes down to, I think. And that's what I try to convey, is through stories and expert research and so on and so forth, is the fact that at the end of the day, we have different things that we choose, and we're going to make mistakes. I mean, we all make mistakes all the time, and that's good, because if you're making mistakes, it means you're trying things. If you never make a mistake, you don't move.
Yes.
So that all comes together.
Yes. Choices, the power of making your own choices, which has as a possibility the power, like the possibility of making not the wrong choice, but a choice that doesn't actually give you what you thought you were going to get. And that's an experience from which you can make more choices and learn.
Right, right. And the key to all that, I believe, is, so we've got the point, we've got the step of making a choice, or being open-minded enough, getting our mind open enough that we're looking at choice. And then bringing in information so we have new data to sort through. And the important thing there is we need to get rid of the noise, all that emotional baggage that we carry, all that crap we hear by who we surround ourselves with. If I find that, since I pretty much live in an energy state, that not only am I open to positive energy, but that means I'm open to negative energy. So therefore, I need to limit the possibility of negative energy coming in. Or if I know I'm going to be around negative energy, to try to surround myself with a protective bubble so that it doesn't get into my soul. But it all goes back to choice. What is your desire? And then it's so important to take the time to think. And that's where we fall down so oftentimes, is we get so busy. And we don't think. We just don't give ourselves that opportunity to learn. Because if you can't think about what's happening, and all you're doing is reacting, you might as well be a gerbil running on a spinning wheel. I mean, there's no positive input that's coming into your decision making. Does that make sense?
Of course, yes, it does make sense. We're kind of living out of automatic patterns, and the busyness just feeds those patterns by default without actually taking a moment to pause and really truly feel. Because before a choice, there has to be a pause to feel
There has to
into.
be a pause.
Yeah, so
You're
that makes
so
perfect
right.
sense.
Yeah, you're so right. So what about you? What is one of an example of a time when you've had to where you've wanted something that you don't have and you needed to have, but it really was a difficult thing to have?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share?
Yeah, I can share that for sure. Well, the birthing of this podcast and this work that I've been doing has been that the pause was forced upon me by life, as in my listeners know this, they've heard me sharing this at times. My marriage was going down, my relationship with my eldest daughter was really not good. Um, and my work wasn't going well, and I never was diagnosed because I didn't go to seek a diagnosis, but I could have been labeled as depressed because I was
Mm-hmm.
not motivated, unable to really feel any joy, any happiness. And that was, I didn't want to pause, but I had to.
No, it makes
Life
you.
makes you pause, exactly.
Yeah,
um and yeah, there was a choice there, which was not easy. It was like, okay, I can stay in this bubble and keep saying that it's everyone else's fault and that I have no control, or I can take the next step and go in a different direction, which has birthed the work that I do now. So,
and what did you really think about when you were doing that? What kinds of things did you have to explore or sit with?
um, aspects of myself that I didn't like admitting to mainly.
Mm.
It's so much easier to explore the bits that we kind of,
Yes,
it's like, oh, my mother is a narcissist. Well, I can explore that because it's her fault anyways. But
right.
actually just go with, oh, the patterns, like that my mother's energy and type of behavior, despite my attempts and not replicating it with my daughters, was actually really coming true with the exact same energy with my eldest daughter, although it had a different flavor, but the energy behind it was the exact same. So that was a big deal. Element of my way of relating with my husband and the masculine world in general, which came from patterns from childhood that were really intense to explore and accept. But without going through those, I couldn't then make the shift.
Exactly. I know one of the hardest things for me was to forgive myself for being a subpar mom. And because I'm an overachiever and I worked really, really hard to be a super mom. And instead of being a super mom, I wasn't even an average mom. I was a subpar mom.
Mm.
And I realized, well, of course I was. I had a crappy mom. I mean, she was really a lousy mom to me. She thought I was possessed by the devil and tried to get it exorcised from me. And my dad put me in the nut house. So I really didn't have a good role model.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how would I learn that? How would I learn to be emotionally available? Because I didn't see it modeled at home. And it wasn't until I was in my 50s and was going through therapy and realized that there was something that I could do to make sure my granddaughter had a different experience than what my children had. And that was to learn to become emotionally available. And that meant dealing with a lot of the pathology that I'd been carrying with me, which probably was generational. You know, I came out of a shame-based family system. You came out of a narcissistic-based family system. Those things oftentimes are generational, and it's in your DNA. I mean, and it's the patterns that you're born into. It's your programming. So you then have the choice, once you're aware and acknowledge it, to own it. Just like for me to admit, oh my God, I'm a subpar mom. I mean, talk about a dagger to the heart. But it was so liberating to my daughters. You know, it allowed them to deal with their resentment and to come to grips with the fact that, hey, my mom is a person, and she really didn't have anything else to work with. And so by me admitting and acknowledging the fact, it has helped them grow. And when my granddaughter is just so dear to my heart, and she's 25 years old right now, and as my daughter has been reading my book, and this is what thrills me more than anything, the relationship between she and her daughter is now healing, because they're understanding really what the whole context is and how we need to work through things. And I think, to me, that's one of the absolute greatest gifts that I've been able to experience because of doing this. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? I think
that is so cool. And I know a lot of the listeners are I'm sure they're listening to this and going, if only my mother could do that. Because I can tell, as a daughter, I know that if my mother would come to me at any stage, and we haven't been talking for 3.5 years, we're no contact, she's extremely toxic, but if she came to me at any moment and took responsibility, which is what you're saying, like actually just admitted, okay, this is where I've been at, these were the tools I had, but I'm admitting that to you, that's it. Like, so much healing. That's actually what it takes to break generational trauma, really, that opening to take responsibility.
But let's think about this a minute. So by the time my mother died years ago, and it's really not about her. What it is, it's about me. And what do I do about it? So let's say your mother never comes to you. So she's not capable. So you just have to get over it and drop it, because now you have the opportunity to be the interrupter, you know. And when I realized that I had the opportunity to be the interrupter of our family-based system, oh my God, that was so exciting. I mean, yes. Talk about liberation. Woo! I can change now the future generations of our family. And that's powerful. So it's the fact that we're able to claim our own power, and we just need to forgive those that, it doesn't mean we forget, but if we can forgive them for what they do and what they've done, we can drop that baggage, and then we become free to move on. Because by us carrying the baggage, it doesn't punish them. It doesn't punish them a bit, not a bit. And no matter how hard we try, we can't change the past. You know, it's done. So, but if we can drop the baggage, wow, we're light, we're flexible, we can move, we can chuck and jive, we can look at opportunities, we can take advantage or not, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so liberating once we get that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, when we go back to that question that you had asked me about that point in time where I had to make a choice, it was a choice down to that. It was an acceptance of, okay, my mother will never change or take responsibility as long as I'm expecting it from her and I'm here waiting for that to happen. I'm always going to be a victim and I'm always going to be powerless.
Right.
And then instead I make a choice and go whatever about what she's doing, but what I can do, it's all these things. So yeah,
Right.
I totally get that.
Absolutely. And what you're doing now, I mean, the fact that now you're dedicating so much of your time and energy to help other women
Mm-hmm.
that are in that same situation. And it's so powerful because you really get it. You know, you really understand the hurt that they went through and the yearning and all of that. But you got to get over it. You do. You got to get over it. Because if you don't get over it, you're still giving them the power to control your life.
Yeah.
And you don't want that.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. It's never a good thing. So,
Mm-mm-mm.
so good for you. That's fabulous. And I'm so happy with the work that you're doing. It's wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for saying that. So I guess the next question that comes is like, so okay, we have to get over it. We have the power to make a choice. The power is in our hands. So what can we do about this? Like what can you share? Something that's actually maybe practical and actionable that can bring on that capacity to make that choice that or even from the point of choosing, okay, I've chosen, I want an empowered life, I want to leave my past behind, I want to do things differently. What am I going to do? What are the next steps?
Right. So that's really what my book is about, is that yes, it's a story of my life and it's a story of a lot of other women and so forth in there. But at the end of every chapter, there's a dream framework. And really what it is, dream is an acronym. D is for desire. What do you want? Do you want to become the best version of you? Is the dream you're dealing with how to forgive yourself and others? Is your dream how to say no and set boundaries? You know, because there's so many different pieces. There's a dream for all of these. So, whatever that desire is, then the next step is explore. What are the factors that I should look at or that I can look at that either I want to leverage or I want to stop? you know, what's going on here? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's a matter of and that comes from reflection. You know, it's you think, you stop, you pause, like you said, you've got to take that pause
Mm-hmm.
to think and explore the E, and then A is acknowledge. It's just like my friend Debbie, who had to acknowledge that she was the one that was letting these toxic people in her life. You
Mm-hmm.
know, she was the one that was letting herself have all that yucky stuff around her. And she had to acknowledge that. And then I really believe it's important to have a mantra, and that's the M. And that's your little saying as far as whatever works for you. Um, to give you an example, I have a good friend Angie, who is dealing with all kinds of health issues and crap and all that. And her mantra is, today I'm going to have PMA, not PMS. PMA is positive mental attitude. And we all know what PMS is. So
Yes.
every day, no matter how bad she feels when she wakes up, it's, yay, today I'm having PMA, not PMS. And, and my friend Debbie, her dream was, when she wakes up, it is, I am worthy to have my dreams come true. Even my big, fat, hairy, audacious dreams, because
Mm-hmm.
I am worthy. And that's the affirmation she needs every day. So, we find that this dream framework works: desire, reflect, explore, acknowledge, mantra. So, what I've done on my website is you can download one for free, no strings attached, just a gift from one wise woman to another. And that can help you on your way. You don't have to buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I invite you to that.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is a real gift.
Yeah.
There's going to be all the
Hopefully,
links. There's going to be all the links in the description of the episode. So for anyone listening in going, oh yeah, I really would like that, you're going to have the links and you can find that. Yeah.
Right. It's just at loripappas.com/dream. And we'd love to do that. And then another thing that we've started is a Facebook group, the Wise Woman Sisterhood. And what that is become very exciting because we've got a number of podcast hosts like you, a number of authors, a number of wellness coaches, and different people that have all found a gathering place. And that's something else that's very available. And we would love to have you join.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'll have a look at it for sure. And again, for all the listeners, that sounds like a really good place, and the link is going to be there.
Right.
Because it is part of making that choice. And I don't know if you've found that in your experience, is that when we make these transformative decisions and choices in our life, there's some stuff that we got to leave behind. And sometimes that also includes people, as in the friends and the people like your friend Debbie with the toxic people that she had around. So there can be a moment where maybe the people that you have around are not actually aligned with the new choices you're making. And so having a space where you can find a new group of people which feels more aligned to that can be really helpful.
I'll tell you, alignment is so important. When you're able to sort through and figure out what is your moral compass, because you have the right to define your own moral compass, then that means you want to align the rest of your life with your moral compass. That means who you interact with, what you do, what you listen to, what you read, what you look at. If you're always listening to garbage, I mean, stuff that really doesn't feed your soul, where's your soul getting fed? How are you giving yourself the chance to win? We have a responsibility to set ourselves up to win. It's nobody else's responsibility. It's our responsibility. So anyway, we could go on and on.
Oh yeah, it's like it's the fuel, isn't it? For like those choices, that fuel, you consciously, and again, it's another choice. You choose what fuel you want to put in your tank to then go for the decision that you've made and the life that you've chosen, for sure.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier, so that being open, obviously, to positive energies, but you also can be a receiver of what's not so positive, and so that you set yourself up in a way that you're less exposed to that. So that made me think about boundaries, which is something so important. And definitely when we had mothers that not only they didn't show us what healthy boundaries are, but they also trained us and conditioned us that boundaries are a wrong thing, because if you had an opinion with your mother, you were told that was not a good idea, or if you wanted to have a boundary, you were told that that's not the place to be. You should not be disrespectful to your mother. You shouldn't speak back. You shouldn't do that, and so forth. So we are conditioned that boundaries are not a thing. And especially through traumas, like you mentioned, I mean, being brought into a mental institute, having someone trying to exercise, like those are a whole bunch of breaches of boundaries, sexual abuse, all of that. So, and I know there's plenty of listeners that have been through a lot of that. So what would be your approach with boundaries? How would you Speak to that.
What I like to tell people, first of all, I always I like to share things that are actionable and doable
Mm-hmm.
realistically. So I think the important thing to do at first is set a little boundary, just a little one, just because you need to practice. Set a
Mm-hmm.
little boundary and see how it works, and then set one that's a little bit bigger and practice keeping that boundary. It's one thing to set a boundary, and it's another one to keep it and to realize and to say to yourself, okay, if this boundary is breached, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to leave the room? Say my boundary is I'm not going to accept, um, I'm not going to accept John calling me a bitch. And so what am I going to do when John calls me a bitch? Now, a boundary is not, don't call me a bitch. I mean, that's just a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But if John calls me a bitch, maybe my boundary is I'm going to say, if you're going to call me a bitch, I'm leaving the room. And the next time he calls you a bitch, you leave the room.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever. It's something that's it's one thing I remember the first time I even learned about boundaries was when I was in a grocery store and the kids were screaming or something, and I was talking to my sister on the phone, and she heard me say to my kids, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to whatever. I can't remember what the whatever was. And then of course they weren't quiet. And my sister said, well, why did you threaten that? Because you didn't do it. And it was true, and we've all been at fault with that, because we're reacting. But it all goes down to if there's a behavior we want to stop, we need to have a consequence for it not
Mm-hmm.
stopping. And start small, start small because you're going to fail. Guaranteed, it's not going to work. And then try it again. And then maybe change it a little bit until you get it so that there's a consequence that you can do. And you learn from it. And then you learn how to build up.
Mm-hmm.
And just forgive yourself for failing. Just expect it because we're not perfect and we don't know what we're doing. We're trying something new. Of course, we're going to make mistakes. That's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a full-on retraining of the system, and so therefore, being a training, there's going to be trial and fail because that's kind of part of training.
Right. Exactly. It's exactly right.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that because boundary is always something that's so important. The next question that comes after that is, um, how would you deal, or have you had experience of it with the guilt that can come after that? Because so you can state your boundary. We have on the platform, I share a 3-step process, which is you prepare to sit. That's the first step for the boundary. Then you state it, and then you maintain it, which would be the consequence that you're talking about. So like that, those are the 3 steps. But what can happen is that before, during, and after, we can be quite crushed by guilt, especially when that boundary is set with someone like a mother, which we can be quite enmeshed with, quite like the relationship can be quite messy. So have you felt that? Have you dealt with that, or have you guided people through that? Maybe you speak
Sure.
to that in your book. I don't know.
I do speak to it. And really, the bottom line is, and I discovered this while I was writing my book because I was doing a lot of research, and I just love this phrase. So if you feel guilty because you weren't perfect, I think what you need to acknowledge is you're not the only perfect person in the world because nobody's perfect. So what makes you think that you're going to be the one person in the world that's perfect? What made you so special that you get to be the only perfect person? You don't. None of us are. So you're just being a human being. You're just like everybody else in that we're not perfect. And I think that really helps with guilt.
Mm-hmm.
It really does, because one of the things that we women have had to struggle with so much is when we're little, we're told to be good. We're always told to be good. And what does good mean? It means be seen, don't be heard, don't have an opinion, don't talk back, don't don't be rambunctious, don't make noise, all that stuff. Don't mess with my space, basically. Well, what does that do? That trains us to be doormats, trains us to be a doormat, trains us to not have a voice, not use our voice, not take risks. I mean, so when we're real little and we're told to be good all the time, we're not being set up to win at all. We're set up to being a wallflower that's plastered on the floor or the wall or whatever and walked on. So it's up to us to get rid of that programming. We need to counter it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so that guilt could really dial back to, oh, I feel guilty because I'm not good, quotes. I feel guilty because I'm not perfect. I forgot to do what I said I was going to do as a consequence. Um, I got scared. I'm afraid. And so, yeah, you're all that stuff. You're a human being. So let's just break it down. And that's why what I've tried to do is to break it down. So, what are these different fears? How do we react when we're uncomfortable? What can we do so we like to be in an uncomfortable state so we're allowed to grow?
Mm.
It's complex, but it's fascinating, and it's a wonderful time to be a woman. It's wonderful. And I'm an older woman. I'm 76 years old. And I just love being alive at this time. It's so fabulous. It's the best time of my life. And and there's just so much opportunity.
Very true. Yes. Mm-mm. And it's one thing that I do say when I'm working with clients, and on that point of having been conditioned that we need to be a good girl, that we need to be this like perfect, but perfect that has specific criteria as to what perfection
Right,
actually is embrace the messy. It's like, which is
right,
becoming comfortable to be uncomfortable. There are going to be messy emotions in there. There's going to be messy moments. There's going to be things that you do that don't turn out as you expected them to do. And there's going to be boundaries that don't work. There's going to be all those moments, but if you can embrace that messy, then you're not scared of it anymore as much.
right. And it goes back to what you were saying. So you're in the middle of this mess. What do you need to do? You have to pause.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow you have to give yourself permission to take that time to think, not, oh my God, what am I going to do about all this? But wow, I'm really in a pile of crap. Let's start sorting it out a little bit. Let's start thinking about these different elements. What did I do to get myself in this mess? Because I'm the one that am, if I'm here, I stepped into it or I allowed it to be created around me. So
Mm.
I'm a participant. What did I do? Because as we all know, the only person's behavior that we can affect is our own.
Yes.
That's the only behavior we have any control over. That's it. So let's work on our behavior, our choice, our reaction, our dreams. What do I need to explore? What do I need to acknowledge? And realize I know a lot of stuff. I do. I have lived this life. I have survived the toxicity of my parents or whatever that trauma is. I'm a survivor.
Mhm.
I know a lot of stuff. So let's just start pulling apart those threads of that tapestry and see what that stuff looks like. And be kind, treat yourself like you're your own best friend. Give yourself a little slack, get off your back. Just get off your back and realize you were not created perfect. Nobody is. And that's how it is. I mean, ask my kids, they'll certainly tell you I'm not perfect.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know?
I get so much feedback from my daughters, so for sure you get the same answer.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's it's funny. I've connected with some of my former employees from 30 years ago, and I love them so much. And and I was asking them. I said, "Well, tell me, when I was your boss, was I kind? Because I worry about was I kind." And I'll never forget one of my dear um, former employees and now a dear friend, Patty, looked at me and she said, "Lori, yeah, you were you were kind, but you were tough, but you were kind." I mean, you still it's there, it's there. We all have imperfections. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We all are unique. And that's what makes it so wonderful.
Hmm.
And we all have gifts. Every single one of us has gifts that we can leverage. And that's why I start the book with winning with the cards you were dealt. Let's figure out, what were you dealt? Let's acknowledge what you were dealt. Just like you've shared, you were born with a very narcissistic, controlling mother. That's one of the big cards you were dealt.
Hmm.
But the benefit is you've become you and you've developed into this wonderful human being. So there's been some really good things you've been able to pull out of that and learn
Yes.
from that. And that has helped you. So it hasn't been all bad. There's been just like my mother who thought I was possessed by the devil. But you know what? My mother didn't do that intentionally. She didn't set out intentionally to hurt me. And my mother started her own business at 70 years old. So I'm sure a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit came from her. And so there's goodness as along with the pathology that she was born with, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
So none of us are black and white. We're all fuzzy and mushy and all kinds of colors.
Yes, for sure. And one of the things that comes to mind with that is that there's a lot of healing in finding meaning to what you've been through. So what you're saying, like
Mm,
you were using me as an example, for me that was like a
hmm
big turning point. If I
hmm
can transform, not only being through the experiences I've been through has made me really observant, capable to read a lot of sign in people, because I had to be hyper vigilant around my mother. But now when I'm with a client, I can use that to actually support
hmm
them through what they're going through. And that's just one of the many things. But being able to give a meaning to my experience into what I do now actually gives it meaning. So that can bring a lot of healing into it.
A lot of healing, a lot of healing. Like I realized that being considered a devil and being put in the nut house helped me develop a very, very tough skin. And because I had a very tough skin and I was very focused in what I wanted to accomplish, I was a successful entrepreneur in a male dominated industry at a
Mm-hmm.
time where women were really subjected to a lot of crap. It
Mm-hmm.
was not always a fun place to be, but the arrows just deflected off of me. because I had that tough skin. Now, of course, that tough skin also made me emotionally unavailable. So everything kind of weaves together, and that's fine. That makes us who we are. But once again, we just go back to where we started the conversation. It's choice. This is where I am today. What am I going to do with what I have right now, where I am? And that's why I think it's so important to have a model like the dream to say, okay, what am I going to do? What's my desire? What do I need to think about? What do I need to reflect on? What do I need to explore? What do I need to acknowledge? So, what's going to be my rally cry? What's going to be my mantra? What's going to help me get up that hill? And that desire can be different every day. It's okay. But let's have a way to work the desire.
Yes. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I know reading in your bio, like the last thing that I want to ask you, or yeah, if you could speak to that would be lovely. So there's so many different ages in my listeners, and I know I do get a lot of clients and a lot of listeners that are in the 50 plus, and when they come to me, they're maybe in my community. We have a community, and there's like different age groups within the community, and there's this kind of feeling of, oh, for the girls that are coming into this work that are maybe in their 20s, that the ones that are 50 plus are like, oh, it took me this long, and now I'm nearly at the end. It's like I've wasted time. But then I'm reading in your bio that you actually found the love of your life at 65, and now you're promoting this book that you're bringing into the world and supporting people. So I've always felt, because I've had experiences like that in my life and in my family, with that is never too late. But when I tell them, they don't believe me because I'm 40. So I'd like...
Oh, you're 40? Oh,
yes.
My God. You're a baby.
Exactly. That's why they don't believe me. They laugh. But so
Yeah.
I would love if you could, speak to that. What's your take with that?
Okay. Well, so let's see. I married my first husband at 19 because I desperately needed somebody to love me. And we got divorced when I was 30 because we were not a good match. I married my second husband when I was 35. I just started my business. I was pretty desperate again. And we got divorced when I was 50, about. No, I got divorced when I was 57 because that's when I went to Africa. And I was never really happy with him at all. And once again, he was trying to control me. And so I'd had two unsatisfactory marriages. And when I then moved to Africa and I had started an international charity and I was living alone and I was busy with work and there was a lot of exhaustion, but I loved it. I loved being unfettered and free. I loved just living my life. I thought it was great. And then by my mid 60s, it was getting to be time when I was going to have to leave because it was getting very unsafe where I was. And I had accomplished a lot of my goals in what I was trying to do with setting up the charity and helping a lot of people and so forth. And my daughter said, well, Mom, why don't you go online dating? I thought, oh my God, I don't want to do that. I don't want somebody to mess up my life. But I was a little bored. And I thought, okay. So I set up this profile and I said, okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I do. And it would be really great if you wanted to meet up someplace once a quarter, have a lot of fun in some great spot in the world. And then you get on your plane and you go back home and I'll get on mine and I'll go back and do my life. Well, I didn't get very many matches. I mean, that was really not a real hot subject for the over 65 group. And I quickly got bored with the whole idea of online dating. And then my husband, Bill Butcher, happened to find my site, and he decided that I was the one for him. Now, Bill is an old campaign manager, and he's used to winning, and he's used to running campaigns. And I became his campaign. And we met, and I know the first time we got together, I said, well, okay, I'll hang out with you a bit, but just know I'm never going to marry you. And he said, okay. He said, that's okay. We'll just be unfettered and free together. I thought, that's a good line. I like that. That sounds good. And then he said, and I'll do everything in my power to make you happy. I thought, oh, that's a better line. I like that one even better. And so within a year, we were married. That was 9 years ago. And here we are. And I'm really delighted that I'm married and that he and I have a great life together. So it's just a matter of, I guess, being open-minded, taking a risk, exploring new opportunities, and just allowing yourself to live life.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry about I know my second daughter said to me, Mom, now why are you doing this? You told me you're never getting married again. And I said, because I changed my mind. And be willing to change your mind. You've got all kinds of choice. It all goes back to that choice. You don't have to do what you said you were going to do yesterday. And just because you believe something today doesn't mean it's true. Maybe you'll find out more information that allows you to believe a little differently tomorrow. That's okay. That means you're growing. Change is good. It's good. It means you're growing, means you're vibrant, means that you're living, you're breathing, you're moving. It's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And that's another beautiful example of the magic of yes, because ultimately
yes.
there was a big yes there. So that's wonderful. Lori, we've been talking for about an hour, which has been flying. The conversation has been amazing. So we're coming to the end of our time, and I'd love to ask you if there's something that you would like to add, some final message you want to give the listeners, something you feel maybe we didn't bring in or that you want to underline more. You're welcome.
Yeah, what I really would like to invite you all is to go to my website, loripappas.com/dream, and download the dream of your choice. And it's a good start. It really is. And it's fun, and they're pretty. It's something that's comes out on a pretty PDF that you can put in a cheap little frame and pin on your wall or in your cubicle at work or whatever. And let's start dreaming with a capital D, not a little d, with a capital D, where the D is for desire for you. Thank you.
Yes, I love that. And that's actually a beautiful way to wrap up the episode. It's such a beautiful call to action. And again, the links are going to be in the description. Now, Lori, don't go anywhere even when I say goodbye and stop the recording, so I can say goodbye to you properly afterwards. Right. But for everyone listening in, thank you so much for being here, for having listened to this episode, for being part of this amazing community that we have together. So thank you for that. And I'm going to wish you a wonderful day and lots of love. Bye for now.